The 20th century did not begin with celebration or unity. It began with unease, with nations watching one another through narrowed eyes, measuring strength, counting weapons, and preparing for a future they feared but believed inevitable. Europe stood at the center of this tension, dominated by empires that had grown powerful through conquest and exploitation, their borders drawn by ambition rather than reason. And beneath the surface of diplomacy lay resentment that had been building for decades. Industrialization had transformed society, but it had also transformed war. Machines now determined outcomes, and nations believed that whoever could produce more steel, more guns, and more soldiers would dominate the future. War was no longer a failure of politics. It was seen as a continuation of it. Military planners across Europe prepared for a conflict they believed would be short and decisive, studying maps, calculating timetables, and assuring their leaders that victory would come quickly. But none truly understood what modern warfare would become. When the spark arrived in 1914, alliances activated automatically, dragging nations into a conflict they could no longer control, and within weeks, Europe was at war. With millions marching toward battlefields they would never leave, World War I shattered every illusion about honor and glory in combat. Soldiers entered the war expecting movement and heroism, but instead found themselves trapped in trenches carved into mud-soaked earth stretching for hundreds of miles, where life was brutal and degrading, surrounded by filth, disease, and death, with rats feeding on corpses and artillery thunder that never ceased. Battles were fought not for victory, but for position. Thousands dying to capture a few meters of land only to lose it days later. And chemical weapons added a new layer of terror, with poison gas burning lungs and skin. Soldiers fumbled desperately with gas masks, knowing a few seconds of delay meant slow death. The war dragged on, societies collapsed under strain, factories worked non-stop, families received telegrams of loss, and entire generations were erased, leaving Europe physically and psychologically broken. Yet the end of the war did not bring healing. Peace was harsh and punitive, imposing blame and humiliation, stripping nations of territory, forcing debt, and leaving resentment to grow. Economic collapse shattered societies. Inflation destroyed savings, unemployment bred desperation, and people lost faith in democratic institutions, creating fertile ground for leaders who promised strength, order, and national rebirth. They spoke in simple terms, offering clear enemies and easy solutions, and fear made people listen. By the 1930s, the world was moving toward war again, nations openly factories converted to engines of destruction. Military parades symbolized power, and diplomacy repeatedly failed, not because leaders did not see war coming, but because they believed they could control it, and they were wrong. When World War II began, it unfolded with speed and violence unmatched by anything before. Armored divisions broke through borders, aircraft dominated the skies, and entire countries fell in weeks. Civilians were no longer distant observers, they were targets. Cities were bombed relentlessly, neighborhoods turned to rubble, families fled with nothing, and survival became the only goal. Occupation brought curfews, shortages, and terror, yet resistance movements emerged in secrecy. Ordinary men and women risking everything for fleeting moments of freedom, even as millions perished in the shadows. In the East, the conflict became a nightmare of scale and intensity, with cities encircled, starved, and destroyed. Soldiers fighting through freezing winters and scorching summers, often without supplies. millions dying not only from combat but from hunger and disease, and entire populations uprooted, deported, or executed. Meanwhile, in the Pacific, conflicts spread across thousands of islands and vast oceans. Naval battles and amphibious assaults became decisive, and civilians endured occupation, massacres, and forced labor, demonstrating that no territory or population could escape global war. Technology accelerated faster than ever, producing weapons capable of mass destruction, propaganda shaping entire societies, children growing up knowing sirens before music, life reduced to endurance and vigilance, and neutrality almost impossible to maintain. Slowly, momentum shifted as battles once thought unbreakable were contested again. Armies adapted, civilians organized to sustain themselves and soldiers, and nations mobilized entire populations to endure. Yet cities revealed ruins and survivors hollowed by trauma. Families searching desperately for loved ones who would never return, and victory measured in absence. Desperation led to unprecedented weapons. Science produced tools capable of ending war in moments. In the Pacific, atomic bombs obliterated Hiroshima and Nagasaki in seconds, killing tens of thousands instantly and leaving countless more to suffer from radiation. Ending the war but ushering humanity into the nuclear age. Japan surrendered, and World War II officially concluded. Yet peace did not bring comfort. Societies were broken, economies in ruins, millions displaced. Survivors returned to destroyed cities. Governments faced monumental tasks of reconstruction, tribunals documented war crimes, and memorials were built to honor the dead, yet the trauma was indelible. Even as nations rebuilt, tensions emerged. Former allies became ideological rivals. The Cold War began, fought with threats and espionage. Nuclear shadows looming, and survival now dependent on diplomacy as much as armies. The human cost was immense. Tens of millions dead, communities destroyed, cultures fractured, cities leveled, and human psychology scarred. But the wars revealed both humanity's capacity for atrocity and its resilience. As survivors resisted oppression, rebuilt societies, and preserved stories of endurance, the world wars reshaped the planet, creating new alliances, institutions, and understandings of rights and governance, forcing humanity to confront industrialized destruction and moral responsibilities, leaving a permanent lesson that when fear, division, and ambition override empathy, catastrophic mistakes are repeated. Ultimately, the legacy is dual, a warning of destruction and a testament to endurance, courage, and the human spirit. History does not guarantee safety. It provides guidance, and every generation must heed it. The world wars, with their devastation, loss, and suffering, left an indelible mark, memorialized in stories, education, and collective memory, reminding humanity that the choices made in fear and ambition can reshape civilization, and that vigilance, empathy, and understanding are essential to preserve peace.